Hello, Professor Bikman.
Yes, yeah, of course, call me Ben. Good to see you as usual. You're still in Dubai, right?
Yes, it's been so long, but you're in London.
Remarkably, I am. Yes, so here I am in the hotel room. Yes, and happy to be here.
Are you in what time zone is your head in?
Oh, it's very much still mountain time. Yeah, so I'm awake, but I'm not really.
Right.
It looks like I'm
Okay.
awake.
Well, you know me, I won't be testing you too much.
Yeah, well,
um,
thankfully, my basal state, my resting state is sleep deprived, and so
right.
I'm always okay, regardless of how slept I am.
Okay. All right. Your resting state is very different to mine, obviously. First of all, Ben Bikman, who is a professor, do you have time to be a professor with everything else? Your life must have changed quite a lot in the last year or so.
Oh gosh, oh yeah, yeah. It's I am a professor and I love every minute of it. And thankfully, one of the fun things about academia is the opportunity to apply some of those academic principles out in the real world, to come out of the ivory tower, if you will, and see how some of these ideas land on the ground and how they work in real life. And that's certainly something I take very seriously and I'm very passionate about, including what we do here and the things we talk about now.
And insulin is your speciality?
That's right. Yeah. So it's been among many professional missions of mine. It's certainly been an emphasis to help people appreciate what that modest little hormone does. When people hear the word insulin, they will think, "Oh, well, Ben just studies diabetes."
Yeah.
But we all have insulin, unless we have type 1 diabetes and we need to inject it. But I prefer to study more of the pathogenic side. So, what happens to the body when insulin starts to get too high for too long? And then that's the foundation of all metabolic problem, essentially. Yeah, that's a good question. So two parts to that question. It absolutely affects all of us. In the United States, in 2016, a report was published finding that 88% of adults in the US suffered from one or multiple aspects of what's called the metabolic syndrome. And the metabolic syndrome is just kind of a sexy term for what used to be called the insulin resistance syndrome, and which is this constellation of problems: high blood pressure, bad blood lipids, too certain blood lipids, waist circumference being too high, so too big around the waist, and a high glucose. And again, those are all problems related to disordered metabolism and insulin resistance. So again, 88% of adults were found to have one or multiple of those problems. Now, it's tempting for people, and I know you have an international audience, to think that this is just an American problem, but that is absolutely not the case. In
No,
fact, the
not
statistics
anymore.
are even worse. Yeah, where you are in particular, in the Middle East, in UAE, it's even worse there than it is in the US. And several countries throughout Southeast Asia and the Middle East are even have statistics that are even more sobering than the ones I just cited. So it's a problem. It's relevant and it's prevalent. And then with regards to the sex differences, unfortunately, men do tend to suffer a little more, and that's because of the relevance of the fat cells. Not to take this on too much of a tangent, it's just so neat, I can't help myself. But the way men and women store fat as a result of the differences in sex hormones is very, very different. Women store fat in a healthier way and in a healthier and in healthier locations than men do, whereas men will typically store fat across the central area, the abdominal region. That's the location, but it's more how we store it. Where men tend to get fat through a process called fat cell hypertrophy, where the fat cell number is set. He's not making more fat cells, and so as there is a pressure, he's eating a lot of sufficient calories and his insulin is elevated. You cannot make fat tissue grow without elevated insulin. His fat cells will grow through hypertrophy. So each individual fat cell is getting larger. That's a very sick way to get fat. It makes the body have higher inflammation and higher insulin resistance. And then in females, in contrast, because of her sex hormones, particularly estradiol, which is the primary estrogen hormone, she does have, not only does she store more of her fat in what's called the subcutaneous, or right beneath the skin fat, particularly on her bum and hips, but the way she can store her fat is through a process called hyperplasia, where in this instance, the fat cells only get modestly bigger. And the moment they start to get a little big, they make a new fat cell. And then the moment that one starts to get a little big, it makes a new fat cell. So there's a trade-off there, because on one hand, it means her fat cells are all very happy and healthy. But on the other, it means she does have the potential to keep making more and more fat cells, particularly on her bum and hips. And so those regions on a typical woman can tend to just get bigger and bigger. Yeah. But she stays healthier nonetheless, because the fat cells, it's not the mass, it's not the total amount of fat a person has, it's how are you storing the fat? Is it big, sick fat cells, or small and happy, healthy fat cells?
We have happy fat.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, a woman has happy fat. Now, what's sort of ironic in the case of the men, the larger the fat cell starts to get, the more his fat cells start to express an enzyme called aromatase. Now, this seems very like I'm diving too deep, but to bring us right back up, aromatase is an enzyme that will take testosterone and convert it to estrogens. So you now have a man whose fat cells are acting like ovaries. They're converting testosterone, the prototypical male sex hormone, into estrogens, the prototypical female sex hormones. Now, men have estrogens and women have testosterone, of course. Both sexes have both, all these hormones. But of course, a man ought to have much, 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 much more testosterone than estrogens. And as his fat cells get big, in addition to the metabolic problems that come with it, he also starts to have lower and lower testosterone levels and more compromised sperm production, making the man a little less manly, if you will.
Is that why men have moobs?
Or man cans, yes, whatever you want to call them. Yep.
I never heard that one before.
Yeah. Well, that's right, because it's the estrogens that tell the body where and how to store fat. That is why a little boy and a little girl who look almost identical when they're little, as they start to get older and older, now all of a sudden things start to look very different. In part of it, well, it's all because of sex hormones, but part of it is how the sex hormones are telling the body how to store fat. And estrogens tell the body to store fat on the breasts and hips and bum. And now this man with large fat cells, may start to shift some of his fat storage. So in the end, perhaps it's a bit of a corrective mechanism. It's trying to say, hey, you're storing fat in a bad way and we're sick because of it. I'm going to try to help us store fat in a better way. Right. But the consequences are pretty disastrous when it comes to his function and testosterone levels. This is one of the reasons why, in fact, I'll kind of give a more general answer to that, then I'll get more specific. This is one of the reasons why I'm such an advocate of CGMs, because it leads to self-corrective behaviors. When the CGM, in a way, ends up becoming a window to the metabolic soul, most people have no idea how they are metabolically speaking. The CGM will tell you. You'll realize, gosh, every morning I wake up and my blood glucose levels are at 120 milligrams per deciliter, or if Caroline, you're looking at it in millimolar, which I can't. So maybe it's about 6 millimolar or so, or maybe yours is milligrams per deciliter. But depending on where people are around the world. Oh yes, so you are milligrams per deciliter. Yeah, okay, yeah, which is similar to units in the U.S. But in various places around, like here in London, they would prefer to rely on millimolar, for example. But nevertheless, someone would wake up and realize, well, gosh, I'm always high when I wake up. Or they would realize when I eat something starchy, rather than having a nice smooth curve of my glucose going up and then coming back down to normal in 2 hours, it goes really high and it's really messy and it jerks around and there's a lot of static, if you will, in the signal. And then it takes 4 hours before it settles down, or 5 hours. These are warnings. So for me, some of the habits that I've changed is I really, really try to not eat pure glucose. So I have a confession to you and everyone else. Here's my confession. I think
you have a confession every time we speak, and it's just been Halloween. Well, has it got to do with Halloween?
Oh, well, a little bit maybe. But I love gummy candy. I love gummies, but now I rarely eat them. And even less so now that I see what happens. But I know when I eat a bunch of little like gummy bears or, whatever they may be, my glucose levels will skyrocket and then they will plummet. And I will experience something called rebound hypoglycemia, where about 30 minutes after, after just skyrocketing, it'll drop to a very low level, and I will feel, not only will I get a bit of a headache and I feel almost a little like tense but tired at the same time, but I will really want more of a glucose spike. And of course, this is a correction because my brain has felt this massive drop, and it starts to think, hey, we're getting hypoglycemic. We better eat something. And so I've found that that's just something I cannot indulge in. I have to be more diligent because I know what's going to happen and I don't want that consequence. So absolutely, I've had some of my own, despite everything I know, knowledge does not lead to behavior change. That's just one of the realities of being human. But when you see it objectively, when you have that insight, again, the CGM being the window to the metabolic soul, that leads to self-corrective behaviors. You don't have to have someone like Caroline or Ben shouting at you and telling you what to do and teaching you principles. You see what happens. And so the patient who's pre-diabetic, or the individual, and they've been told that they should eat whole grains, they eat some pieces of toast with butter and jam, all low fat, because they've been taught that fat's the enemy. They look at what happens to their glucose levels on their CGM and realize that it skyrockets their glucose and it stays up for hours. Or they eat a plate of bacon and eggs, which they've been told they shouldn't because it has fat, and they realize that it does literally nothing to their glucose levels, and they're stable that entire time. That leads to self-corrective behavior. That's the individual who doesn't need to be told what to do. They learn what to do based on what they're seeing from their own body.
Yeah, and many people are more visual learners anyway. I certainly am.
That's absolutely, there's no question that even insulin resistance and insulin signaling and glucose control can contribute or mitigate some degree of hot flashes. Now, to some degree, it's unavoidable, where this is a consequence of just a very significant change in sex hormones as the lady ages, and leaves kind of the fertile years into the menopausal years. But yeah, it is known, in fact, across the sexes, that spikes in glucose will induce a hot flash, if you will, a metabolic hot flash. This is once again, this is insight partly born from CGM, leading to some additional curiosity on my part. But one of the reasons I'm such an advocate of not spiking glucose prior to bed, in other words, don't indulge in those starchy, sugary snacks before you go to bed, is that you will absolutely sleep worse. If you go to bed in a hyperglycemic state, you have increased your body temperature and you've activated something called the sympathetic nervous system. That is what we commonly refer to as the fight or flight response. When the body, you start to get amped up, your heart starts to beat a little harder and faster, your blood pressure goes up, and body temperature goes up too. And higher body temperature is the leading cause of insomnia in people around the world. You're just too hot. Well, it could be because you are spiking your glucose, and it's that hyperglycemia that's making you hot. So when you combine the unavoidable hot flashes that come from menopause to a degree with the metabolically induced hot flashes, well, now you have a gal who's really miserable.
Right. So, but this helps all people of all ages at the end of the day. We have to be more aware of what our bodies are doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. Well, and once again, that is a reason to defend the democratization of CGMs. The more people who can get access to a CGM and use it, and then be given some help understanding it, which will come from a broader use, then the more they know what's happening, and they don't have to be told or scolded into improving their health. They will see what's happening to their bodies, and it will naturally lead to self-corrective behaviors. I've seen that so frequently enough to give me the conviction to state that. There is a meeting here, a science meeting that some colleagues and I are attending and presenting at. It's a collaborative meeting between the American Physiological Society and the European Pharmacological Society. So one of the, I think, royal scientific entities that they have here. But it's all science with a little bit of roaming the town thrown in there.
But not big pharma, presumably.
No. Yeah. So the evidence that we're presenting has nothing to do with any kind of drug development. It's just we're kind of more on the physiological side. Just how's the body working?
It's going to be so interesting. I wouldn't understand.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I'm sure.
Oh, you'd love it. You'd love it. But naturally, we went. I had to get a picture of little Ben with Big Ben, so it was very fun to go do that. I'd never been to London before. I've been around the world and just never made it through London. So here I am.
Well, hug a tree for me. I love, just keep looking up and you will come across the best trees in the middle of London.
They're enormous. They're enormous.
What have these trees seen?
Yeah. Well said. Especially where you are. You don't see them like this.
No, I don't. I love my London trees. I love this new bottle.
Yes, it's nice and substantial, isn't it?
It really is. And you take it to work every day. So it must
every
be
day.
Nice having the droppable version.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and this is even when we started the conversation, Caroline, and you said, gosh, you're involved in a lot of things. That is sort of my passion project, that right there. When the more I was learning about some of the principles we've just been talking about, including managing blood glucose levels to try to deter metabolic problems like prediabetes or infertility or Alzheimer's disease, all of which have metabolic origins to them. As much as I've continued to learn, I've realized that if someone can control the amount of and the type of carbohydrate that they're consuming and focusing more on protein and fat, then the more they're going to spend time in a normal glucose range and a normal insulin range. And that it's the insulin that ultimately leads to problems. If the glucose is going all over, so is the insulin levels. And so that was part of where I was able to take what was a solution to, or an answer to a scientific problem, like how can a person best keep their insulin under control to deter metabolic syndrome? Then that was able to translate into a real world solution to a real world problem. And so Health Code was that solution where speaking with one of my older brothers, I have a lot of older brothers, I'm the youngest, much to my dismay, but it made for a difficult childhood, but we all get along wonderfully now. But working with one of my brothers, we had come to this decision that it was time to start implementing some of the thoughts that I'd had for years on how could we translate the best available scientific information with regards to metabolic health and make it into something really easy and convenient. Now, I'm a huge advocate of real food, bacon, eggs, nutritious food, even salads, plants, fruits and vegetables, whole food. I'm a huge advocate, but there are simply times when someone doesn't have the time to plan and prepare perfectly packaged meals that are balanced in all the macronutrients that they want. So that's where the Health Code Complete Meal came in. It simply was an opportunity to provide someone with something very convenient where this is one less meal they have to worry about in the course of the day.
And it isn't going to spike your insulin.
That's right. Yeah. In fact, I would welcome anyone put on a CGM and then have some Health Code, and you'll be very, very pleased to see that flat line.
Wonderful. Well, I'm very impressed. Still only vanilla and chocolate? Any ideas of anything coming along?
So yeah. So at the moment, the immediate future is actually working more on a plant-based version, because of what I said earlier, how difficult it is for plant-based diets to get proper nutrition. Particularly protein, as the world has become very obsessed with plant proteins like pea protein, for example, there are very real concerns and considerations to take from that, those heavily processed protein sources. Well, we have a way around that. We have a solution that even while using plant protein, we have the ability, a technology to enhance the absorption of those amino acids, which is the part of the protein that's the kind of fundamental part of the protein. So the immediate priority is to try to find and really finish off a plant-based version. And then I think we'll get into some clever flavors in the future. In fact, you can tell us some of your favorites and we'll see what we can do.
I'm a big fan of the vanilla, and so is David. And he puts a whole handful of spinach in with it and all sorts of, his is the most peculiar color. I'm just the vanilla fan. Thank you, Ben, so much for taking time out to speak to me. I wish that David had been here because his questions would have been a lot deeper than mine.
Oh, this was perfect. I had so much fun. Thank you so much, Caroline.
It's good to see you, and I will keep drinking my health code drink. And have a great trip. I will see you soon, I hope.
Indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.